Hi, I'm Alisa Brownlee, Assistive Technology Specialist with the ALS Association Greater Philadelphia Chapter, and I also work for the National Office. I want to thank you for joining me for this presentation about seating positioning and wheelchair options for people with ALS. And seating and positioning, what does that mean? That means getting you correctly seated in a wheelchair, upright, this way, and your legs down this way. So seating and positioning is crucial for all aspects of dealing with this illness, for living with this illness, being able to go out into the community, being able to just go outside on a nice day, being able to communicate, access your computer or weight shifting. Because proper seating and positioning will allow you for more comfort and less fatigue. It promotes good posture and decreases pain, and allows person to perform activities of daily living better, such as eating and brushing your hair. It also distributes your weight. We have many people with ALS that sit in one position for hours on end. And if you cannot shift your weight and alleviate some of the pressure on your buttocks, you are more prone to have what's called skin breakdown or pressure ulcers, and that can be caused by bad pressure, obviously, and lack of movement. But pressure sores just don't happen on the buttocks. They can also happen on the back of the knees, on the back of legs, on the back of heels. Sometimes people get them on their elbows. So with proper seating and positioning, we can hopefully alleviate any type of pressure sore. Also, wheelchairs can keep you safe by, hopefully not falling out of them. You're prone to fall out of a regular chair if you're just sitting in like a desk chair or a kitchen chair, not so much in a wheelchair. And also, seating and positioning improves a person's ability to see their surroundings and breathe and swallow better. Because if you're sitting in a regular chair, sometimes you're sitting forward and you're kind of crumped into yourself, and it's very difficult, if you can, to still drink this way and eat this way. It's also difficult to communicate. Whereas if I can get myself upright and open my diaphragm, it's easier for me to talk and project my voice. It's easier for me to eat, and it's easier for me to swallow. And it's less painful on my back and on my neck. And if you're trying to use any type of electronic device, a communication device, a tablet, or a phone even, it is very painful to do that when you're not seated upright. So we get a lot of people with ALS who have a weak neck, so their neck is going over here. And so trying to use a device, like taking my phone, I mean, that's very uncomfortable for me to do that. Very uncomfortable for me to look at my computer screen right now. Whereas if I can get people upright, and even in a wheelchair, sometimes tilted back a little, and then you put a lateral support here. Now there's no pain in my neck, and I'm not trying to utilize the device at a 45-degree angle, even a 90-degree angle. The first gentleman I worked with when I was a novice assistive technologist, his name was Paul, and he wanted to write a memoir because he had been a Holocaust survivor, and he wanted to write his history down for not only his family, but he wanted to write a book about it. And I had very little information, just his name and an address, and please go see him. And so I went out, and literally, as this picture is depicting, this is exactly what he looked like. He was over at a 90-degree angle. And the most critical thing I could do, my first intervention was working with our physiatrist. And if you don't know what a physiatrist is, that's a rehabilitation doctor, and our occupational physical therapist, to determine how we could best seat him upright. Because even with the best tools in the world, using a computer at a 90-degree angle is nearly impossible. And so we have to get him seated upright. And we eventually did, working with those three disciplines and also our local wheelchair vendor. We were able to get him upright and able to get him on a computer. And that was a huge quality of life issue for him. So you have to be seated and positioned to do any type of electronic device. And as you can see here from the gentleman at the bottom picture here, he's in his power wheelchair. He has a headrest and he has his, this is an eye gaze device, and it is mounted on the side of his wheelchair. So again, he's in the right position, and with that mount, that device is placed within the right amount of feet from his eyes so that he can utilize that and he can stay comfortable all day with using that device. So it's imperative to understand how wheelchairs are funded by insurance. Every insurance, private insurance, will follow Medicare guidelines. And Medicare guidelines are that you get one wheelchair every 5 years. And there's no exemption to that. It doesn't matter if, you got your wheelchair and you hate it, or you got your wheelchair and it's not right for you. It's one every 5 years. The only exemption to that is if you were given a wheelchair under a different diagnosis. So say, for example, you were diagnosed with Lyme disease or diagnosed with a stroke, and you did get a wheelchair with that diagnosis. If in turn you were then diagnosed with ALS, we can then pursue a new wheelchair because it's a different diagnostic code. But that's the only caveat to this rule. So because the average cost of a wheelchair for a client with ALS is about $32,000, and yes, it is more than a car, we want to make sure that you get your wheelchair benefit for that high ticket item. So we don't want you to use your wheelchair benefit for a manual wheelchair. The kind that you might see in a hospital waiting room when you walk in the door, or one that you might see at a supermarket, one of those just manual wheelchairs with, no positioning or anything else. Those are a few $100s. And a scooter, like this scooter down here, is about $1,700. If you get either of those from your insurance, you're not going to get a power wheelchair from your insurance, okay? Unless, of course, that's another caveat, that your insurance changes. So if you did get a wheelchair from like Aetna, you may be able to get one from Medicare. I'm not going to say it's a definite, but you could. But for the most part, most people are getting their wheelchairs from one specific insurance company. So know that if you're getting it from Medicare, you must have Part B, all right? Medicare, when you sign up, you automatically get Part A, but Part B is the buy-in, and Part B covers durable medical equipment, which is also called DME, and that's where a wheelchair falls in. So you have to have the durable medical equipment policy, which is part of Part B, to get Medicare to pay their 80% of what's called the allowable. So that means 20% would either be charged to the client, or hopefully they have supplemental insurance. I don't know how many people could afford 20% of $32,000. So if you have supplemental or secondary insurance, that will pay the 20% of the rest of the cost of the wheelchair. Some of our folks have what's called managed Medicare. So they've opted not to go for the traditional Medicare plan. They've opted to be in part of managed Medicare, which is similar to an HMO. It's basically a secondary company that manages the person's Medicare. And our experience with managed Medicare is that they only cover 80% of the cost of the wheelchair. And you don't have supplemental insurance when it comes to managed Medicare. There's no option to get supplemental insurance. So often the client is responsible for that 20%. With Medicaid, every state has different coverage. Most Medicaids, I've not heard of them not covering power wheelchairs. Our issue might be if the person lives in a skilled nursing home, which Medicare will not pay for. When somebody is in a skilled facility, Medicare does not pay for a wheelchair at all. Medicaid may. In the state of Pennsylvania, if you have managed Medicaid, then yes, you are eligible for a power wheelchair if you are living in a skilled nursing home, but not Medicare. Okay, Medicare does not pay for a wheelchair if you are in a skilled nursing home. So with private insurance, it would depend on what's called the rider. Your rider is basically the agreement between, usually it's your employer and your insurer, as to what they will cover for every disease, every piece of equipment, every drug. So that's what's called your rider. And so with private insurance, some people have 100% coverage, some people have 80%. I've seen policies with 50%, and I've seen policies that have zero coverage for durable medical equipment. So the most important thing is that if you have private insurance and you're considering getting a power wheelchair, you need to call your insurance company and ask them, what is my durable medical equipment coverage? And then they will probably give you a percentage, and then you will know how much you may owe on that $32,000 wheelchair. And in terms of the Veterans Administration, they do give 100% coverage for power wheelchairs if the veteran is service connected. In order to get a power wheelchair from your insurance company, specialty evaluations are required. In the old days, you could just call up, a 1-800 wheelchair number and say, I need a wheelchair, insure, and they bill your insurance. That's not the way it works anymore. Again, going back to the Medicare criteria, which every insurance follows, is that Medicare requires a specialty evaluation by an occupational or a physical therapist that is also a wheelchair seating specialist. So in order to comply with the Medicare mandates, that's what you have to do. And for the majority of times, that means you have to travel to a special facility, to a wheelchair clinic, and be seen by this physical or occupational therapist. The wheelchair clinics are very specialized. There are very few facilities that have them. In the Philadelphia area, we have 4 right now that we can choose from. That's not a lot. And that 4 also encompasses all of South Jersey and Northern Delaware. So besides going for the specialty evaluation, you will need a doctor's chart note of the need for a wheelchair. So then you go for the evaluation, and then the doctor has to also do a document called the face-to-face. And then the vendor gets all the paperwork in, and they bill insurance. And this process can average 4 to 5 months. And yes, it's long, it's arduous. It's all because of the simply expensive cost of this machine. So Medicare has all these documents and check marks, and a lot of work goes into getting someone a power wheelchair. And so, and a lot of it is just dealing with the Medicare paperwork. And that's what takes the process of 4 to 5 months. In the interim, should you need a loaner wheelchair, most ALS chapters, including the Greater Philadelphia one, has a power wheelchair loaner program that we can loan a chair at no cost from the time you get evaluated until the time yours comes in from insurance. For those affiliated with the MDA Association, they also have a loaner closet that you can ask. So you can tap into either or. So I just wanted to show you some different power wheelchairs that people with ALS use. For power wheelchairs, there's 3 different drives. This is a front wheel drive wheelchair with the biggest wheel in the front. This is a mid wheel drive with the biggest wheel in the mid. And this is a rear wheel drive with the biggest wheel in the back. And this is why specialty evaluations are so important. Your physical or occupational therapist will ask you all kinds of questions about the environment in which you live, about where you will be using your wheelchair, about whether or not you have sharp turns in your home. And so they're going to make the proper determination about which drive you should have, whether or not it's front, mid, or rear wheel for your living environment. And then you also will get what's called tilt and space. And this is a tilt and space wheelchair. All the power wheelchairs for people with ALS come with tilt and space. And basically, and I have a video coming up, but allows you to tilt back and alleviate the pressure on your buttocks. And so the pressure then is transferred to your upper back or even your lower back, as you can see here. That's called tilt in space. Some wheelchairs will also come with recline. Recline is that you can lay fully down here. And we have a significant number of people who find it more comfortable to sleep in their wheelchair than in a traditional hospital bed. So, excuse me. So that is a recline feature there. And then we have seat elevators. This is not a covered item under insurance, but I'm putting this slide in here because there are so many people that ask, how do I get one? Or what are they? Or I've heard about them, or it's mentioned during the assessment and they want to understand what they are. And so it basically takes the base of the wheelchair up about 12 inches. And picture, so you're sitting in a desk chair, and say that you want to then move that desk chair over to a bar. Well, you're not at bar level. And so that the seat elevator takes the seat up to bar level, eye level for you. And you can tilt in space. It's still in that, in the seat elevator. You can also drive your wheelchair if you're upright like this. So it's not just for seating in a stationary position, it does allow you to drive with the elevator up too. So I'm going to play a quick video that you can see. Now, she's in a stationary position, but the wheelchair can still go forward should she want it to right now. So she doesn't have to put it down just to continue to move. Okay, so that's what a seat elevator does. And so it's important to know that the average weight of a power wheelchair is about 400 pounds. So I have a lot of people who say, "Oh, can I buy one of those? You know, the little trailer that goes for a scooter." No, you can't, not with a power wheelchair. All right, this scooter is, you know, less than 100 pounds. Well, a power wheelchair is 400 pounds and it's $32,000. It has very, very complex electronics in there that you do not want to subject to the elements. And there's no way to keep a power wheelchair dry. Even if you put a tarp over it, it's not safe. And it can destroy that wheelchair. And if we go back to you get one every 5 years, and if you destroy your wheelchair and it can't be fixed, you're not going to get a new one. So you might end up with a loaner one for the duration of your illness. Power wheelchairs can't be broken apart and they can't fit into a car. You can't, as I said, put them on the back of a car. So the only way to transport them is an accessible van. And here are some different vans. This is the new Mercedes Sprint or Sprinter. And this is just a traditional minivan. And then this is a full-size van. And I'm sorry, accessible vans can be purchased, leased, or rented. And if that is not an option for you, you can look into public transportation. Right here, this is a SEPTA bus that they use. It's SEPTA Connect. And if you are living in an area outside of Philadelphia or in Philadelphia, As long as you have SEPTA service in your area, you are eligible for what's called their paratransit division, which is the Connect. And so you do have to call a special number. It does have to be arranged in advance, but it is the same cost as using a bus or the subway. If you live in a city, certain cities that have Uber and Lyft handicapped accessible transportation, on the Uber and Lyft app, when it says choose a car, you will see whether or not you live in an area with accessible transportation. I use Uber quite a bit in my area, and just last week when I was using it, accessible transportation came up as an option for me. So you can check that out too. And then if you live within the ALS Greater Philadelphia chapter, within our parameters, which is usually less than 60 miles from the chapter office, and you need to go to the clinic, you can also apply for our chapter transportation program. But it's very limited, and it really is just designed to get you to clinic. So some of our folks end up in custom manual wheelchairs for several reasons. The primary reason that people do it is for transportation. They just find it easier to take a custom manual wheelchair, and if the person already is having or can't drive a power wheelchair, custom manual, the caregiver will say, I don't care, I'll just push it. And they can be folded. Some of these are foldable. They can be put in the back of a car or in the trunk or in a van. And so that you don't have the obstacle of the heavy duty power wheelchair. So custom manuals can come still with that tilt in space feature here or the reclined feature here. But custom manuals do require an evaluation, just like for power wheelchair. You have to go for a specialty evaluation, and there still has to be a doctor's note, and there still has to be a face-to-face. But custom manuals, don't take half the time that power wheelchairs take. That you can get probably a custom manual within 1 to 2 months. In terms of power wheelchair controls, so with progressive neurological diseases like ALS, wheelchair controls will change through time. Most of the time, initially, when you get your power wheelchair, you get it and you have a joystick, on either side, whatever side you can drive on. If you can no longer use the joystick, there are several different options. This is a joystick that's a chin joystick, so you're driving with your chin, sort of with your head movement too, but basically with just your chin up, right, left, and back. And then these at the bottom are head arrays. So on the right here, this head array has sensors embedded into it. So the sensors are here, so as I'm driving my wheelchair, if I want to turn right, I go like this. If I want to turn left, I go like this. And if I want to drive straight, I just go right back. And to stop, I bring my head to neutral. So those sensors drive your wheelchair. And with power wheelchairs, you also get wheelchair integration. So what this means is ECU stands for environmental controls. And on power wheelchairs, that allows the user to use their joystick or a single switch or the chin switch I just showed you or the head array that I just showed you to activate a communication device, a computer, or a cell phone. So you are basically using that joystick or the head array as an access method to a device. So the complex power wheelchairs we get for people with ALS, so they have the multiple seat functions like the tilt in space, the recline, but then they have this mouse emulator, which in most of the complex power wheelchairs that we order are already in the electronics. I think only one company now charges for an upgrade for this mouse emulator. But basically, just take, for example, I'm using my joystick. And so I use my joystick to obviously drive the chair. Well, on the other side of the wheelchair, I'm going to get a little screen And so say I say number one is drive control. And then I take it out of drive control and I put it into number two, which is mouse emulator. And that joystick now becomes the mouse on my screen. And I'm moving the mouse around simply by moving my joystick around. And it's not just on a computer, it can be on a tablet, or it can be on an iPhone or an Android phone. So as long as you have drive controls on that wheelchair, again, through the joystick or any other, the head array or whatever, you can use the mouse simulator to operate your communication device, a phone, a tablet, or a computer. And your local wheelchair vendor can work with you on this mouse emulator and get it set up for you on your wheelchair electronics. So I want to give you some resources. If you have an assistive technology question, not just about wheelchairs, please email me. I am always happy to speak with you. Reach out to me on Twitter, on Facebook. I have a professional ALS Facebook page. It's Alisa Brownlee ALS. And also, there's a really good guide. It's called Your ALS Guide, and it's all about power wheelchairs. And so if you want to go there, there's lots of pictures and videos, and it helps you understand your wheelchair benefit and helps you have a little more knowledge before you go to an evaluation. And so you can ask the therapist certain questions, or you can just be a little more knowledgeable so that you know, oh, this is what they're going to want from me, or that this is what they're going to show me when I go for my evaluation. So I encourage you to check that out too. And so I want to thank you for tuning in today, and please email me with any questions that you might have.